Welcome to Stormwatch. In today's episode, we're diving into network fingerprinting and vulnerability management with some fascinating developments in the cybersecurity landscape. Our featured guest is John Althouse, the creator of JA4+, who has developed an innovative suite of network fingerprinting methods that's making waves in threat detection. JA4+ builds on previous fingerprinting techniques, but takes things farther with human-readable formats and enhanced detection capabilities. John's work comes at a critical time, as we've seen an uptick in zero-day exploits targeting enterprise networks throughout 2023. The latest CISA report highlights how threat actors are becoming more sophisticated in their approaches, particularly in exploiting vulnerabilities before patches can be deployed. Speaking of vulnerabilities, got some concerning news about critical infrastructure security. Recent findings have exposed potential vulnerabilities in around 300 U.S. drinking water systems, highlighting the ongoing challenges in protecting our essential services. This ties directly into the importance of tools like JA4+ for detecting and preventing unauthorized access to critical systems. We're also discussing an interesting development in vulnerability management, VulnCheck's NVD++ initiative. This is so surreal to be reading right now. I have taken over from Bob. We're continuing with the intro. They're outpacing NIST's national vulnerability database by providing CPE data for nearly 77% of CVEs published in 2024 compared to NIST's 41%. This is particularly relevant given the recent disruption in CPE data availability from the NBD.
I don't know why you're reading that. It just makes me laugh. I don't know. It's giving joy.
I'm continuing because it's just really good. Throughout our conversation, we'll explore how these developments intersect and what they mean for the future of cybersecurity, especially in protecting critical infrastructure and managing vulnerabilities effectively. John's insights on JA4+ and its applications in real-world threat detection scenarios are particularly valuable as organizations face increasingly sophisticated cyber threats. So again, welcome to Stormwatch. I've taken it over from Bob Brutus this week.
Did Bob write that? That's really long, and
it's so long.
Sounds like Bob.
Yeah,
it sounds like Bob.
Yeah,
that was me channeling Bob, and I am here with the lovely cast as well as our guest for the week, John Althouse. And our intro question for this week, I'm going to start with you, John. Are you an ice cream in winter person? Are you a cold drinks in winter person?
Yeah, why not? When's a bad time to have ice cream?
Wow, strong opinion.
Not really something that I usually think about. It's just, if there's ice cream, yeah.
Wow.
If there's ice cream, yes.
Yes.
That is the best poem.
Season agnostic, is that what you're saying?
Wow.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, mint chocolate chip has to be.
That's
we're going with flavors. Okay.
Extra cold. Why not? Himija, what's your take?
I'm the opposite. If there is ice cream, I'm usually not an ice cream person. I don't know, it's a textures thing for me. But I'm also just not a cold food person in general. I like things to be hot. I love microwaves. I will microwave my tea 5 times throughout the course of the day because it gets too cold too quickly.
Do you microwave coffee?
Yes.
Oh,
I know.
That's controversial to me. Anyway.
However, I do enjoy iced coffee occasionally just because I feel like certain flavor profiles taste better iced. Like, especially like salted caramel tastes way better iced, and like certain other flavors work better that way. But
I never thought about that. Like, I would never have a cold pumpkin spice latte. That just sounds disgusting.
I have one every year. That's the only way I drink it.
A cold one?
Iced. Everything iced.
So, Emily, are you an ice cream in winter person?
I don't really like ice cream. So,
You're never.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if it's around, I'll take it. But I am very strong, like, team iced coffee 365. Like, that's every day. Like,
that is truly my allegiance, is iced coffee every day. warm coffee is merely a means to an end for me.
Yes, I agree with that.
Glenn, are you an ice cream and winter person?
I eat more ice cream in the winter than the summer. I don't eat a lot, but I do eat more in the winter, and I think that's because in Texas it's so freaking hot that if you're outside and you have ice cream in the summer, it just melts and becomes a sticky mess. So like ice cream in the winter, you can like take your time if you're outside anyway.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. But for coffee, yeah, warm coffee, like one hot coffee in the morning, just because that's, I don't know, the way it is. And then
Tradition.
everything else is iced. If it's not the first cup of the day, it's iced.
That seems to be where Jordan's ending up as well. Warm coffee
Warm
in the morning.
yeah.
Iced is for fun
Also,
in the afternoon.
We're saying warm. We mean hot, right? Not like
Yeah, that's
lukewarm.
true. Yeah, warm is bad. Yeah, it needs to be
Okay,
hot.
I just want to clarify.
Hot or cold. No
Room
warm. Yeah.
temperature.
And microwaving coffee, out of bounds. No.
Overlord, where do you end up on this? She's with John and Glenn. Ice cream, no matter the temperature. Coffee, ice cream specifically.
Oh, combo.
I like that. I also really appreciate an affogato, which is an espresso shot on vanilla ice cream, which is really wonderful.
Is there protein ice cream? Can we make that into a breakfast?
There is. Have you tried Halo Top?
Yeah.
There
Yeah,
are some
but I
other
don't.
ones too.
Halo's not
Yeah.
bad at all, actually.
Yeah.
It's not
Not sponsored.
amazing. Yeah, yeah. But feel free to send some. But yeah.
In Utah, a lot of people have the tradition that the first snow of the season, they will go out for ice cream or like buy ice cream at the store, which I think is really cute and adorable because I love traditions and I might take that one.
You know, I've never had homemade ice cream. Like where you get the salt and the ice and like I've never actually made and had that. I've had like homemade from a store or whatever, but store made, but I've never like made it myself and had it like straight from the churn bucket or whatever. I
Maybe this is the year. Maybe you change.
Maybe this is the year. There's still time. We're only 90% of the way through the year. I got some time.
Yeah. So
John's like, I didn't sign up for this.
I was gonna say, so we have a guest. His name
Like
is
ice
John.
Is there a JA for ice cream? A signature.
There we go.
Yeah. I think we can dive into this now. I think we're sufficiently informed about everybody's ice cream opinions.
Is the ice cream broken?
It is at McDonald's.
It's an icebreaker
Always.
joke. Get it? Okay.
Zing. What is that? Is that a protein shake? Sorry. We're fully
What's
distracted. We're fully squirrel mode.
Oh, me? Oh, sorry. Oh, I forgot I was holding it. Yes.
All right, John, as you can tell, this is not a serious business podcast. This is really just a vibes podcast. It's really just
This is our
quite
weekly Teams meeting.
It's a really, really professionally recorded Teams meeting. So, what I want to start with though is, can you give us and give the audience your started from the bottom now we hear story? Because I think a lot of people know who you are, but I think a lot of people new to the industry have no idea who you are. So explain what happened here.
Starting from where?
From the bottom. So from birth? No.
When were you born?
So,
how did you get into cybersecurity? What made you interested in computers?
well, I suppose it all starts, in high school, just a long time ago, and just wanting to play video games, like specifically PC games. I was never really much into consoles. And back then, PC games didn't just work. You had to work to make the PC game work, which, teaches you a lot about computers pretty quickly. And then in high school, like they had better internet and because I was on dial-up, and they had, some decent computers. And so me and, my computer club friends, we wanted to play games on these PCs, but they were locked down. So we figured out ways of bypassing all the security, and getting into all of the computers in the school and all that sort of stuff. And then what we did with this access that we gained was, install Counter-Strike on the school server. So
Naturally, yeah.
yeah, so that was my little nefarious start to cybersecurity. And then after that, I went into usual like network engineering type stuff. Through to it was for like 8 years, and then I got a job at Symantec, and that was my start in cybersecurity. Worked at Symantec for a little bit, and then went to Salesforce. Was at Salesforce for 10 years, and ended up running the threat detection team there. So, and then at Salesforce, we created this thing called JA4, together with Jeff and Josh over there. And that was passive TLS client fingerprinting, and that ended up getting built into
I
basically
can't help but
everything
notice
that
your
handles
initials are
network traffic.
JA as well.
Yeah. So it was
Suspicious.
me and Josh Atkins and Jeff Atkinson created JA4. Yeah. And then so that got built into a whole lot of tools. And then later at Salesforce, together with my team, we created JARM. So that was with myself, Andrew, RJ, and Mike. So that was active TLS server fingerprinting, and that also got built into a whole bunch of stuff. So essentially what happened was these were open source tools that we created that were getting built into a lot of like, from Google products to AWS to like Cloudflare to Microsoft. Like JA4 is actually in Microsoft Windows now. It's in the Defender product. And then I stopped working at Salesforce. The GitHub repo was getting all of these issues and requests. And people were like, when is JA4 going to get fixed or updated? It's not as effective as it once was. And nobody answered. And companies were reaching out to me like, hey, John, when are you going to fix this? And I was like, this is not my job. Like, this was, it was an open source project. I don't even work there anymore. I don't even have access to the repo. And I was expecting companies like AWS to just like pick this up and run with it, but they didn't. They were coming to me asking for me to fix it. And so then I was like, well, maybe this should be my job. And so I made it my job. So we started Fox.io and created JA4 Plus, and I am working on network fingerprinting full time now. So it is fully supported, and we're working on new fingerprinting methods all the time, and just trying to solve the internet, basically.
So I want to key on the idea of fingerprinting and make sure we get a good explanation of what this looks like on the network protocol side. Like, not going, you don't have to go super in depth, but if there's like a good example that stands out to you, or an explanation of like what you're actually looking at in packets, ? The whole handshake. What do you think?
Yeah.
Where are you at?
Yeah. So it's really packets, and looking at the like specific details in specific packets and how they're formulated, and pulling those pieces out and turning them into a easily understandable and loggable fingerprint. That allows you to get a good understanding of what's going on without having to look at the packets. That's effectively what we're doing.
Oh no.
You good?
Little bit of a network hiccup.
Oh, so John, like with those with fingerprinting, like what so you mentioned like not having to look at the packets. You mean like looking into their content? You're hashing the packet. Is that fair to say?
No.
Okay.
So it's pulling out specific details out of the packets that would matter for understanding what's happening.
Okay.
And then sometimes hashing some of those details, but not all of the details, because there's some details in the packets that wouldn't matter or would cause it to not become a good fingerprint that you could log and
Never have
pivot
another
off of.
match. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So it's important to have the ability to pivot off of these fingerprints and group them together to be like, this is what Chrome looks like, and this is what Firefox looks like, and this is what this piece of malware looks like, and all those sorts of things. Um, and also allow people who have like JA4 plus fingerprints in their logs to just be like, show me all of everyone using Firefox, and it'll spit that out, right? So figuring out exactly how to formulate the fingerprint and the way that would be the most useful for the most analysts, that's the hard part. So a lot of iteration and getting feedback from a bunch of people in the industry.
And this is my last baby level intro question to just make sure that we're all on the same level here. Why would somebody want to do this? Like, why would they want fingerprints? What's the outcome? What's the actionable response from all of this?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's so often people think that there's no point in looking at the network traffic because it's all encrypted. So what are you going to see? And the answer is you can see everything. Like you can hand me a TLS session and I can tell you exactly what's happening. Well, I wouldn't be able to tell you like what like what people are typing or what's going on there, but I would be able to tell you like this is Chrome on a Windows 10 machine talking to a Ubuntu system, and they're coming through a VPN or a proxy, and this is how far away they are. There's a whole ton of information that you can get, even if the traffic is encrypted. And I think that's the key. That's the thing that people who are running JA4 Plus are really realizing just how valuable this can be, and that they're suddenly like, I wish we had more than just NetFlow.
But it doesn't require the connection to be encrypted, correct? That's just
No, it doesn't.
hours.
I mean, honestly, if the connection's encrypted, sometimes you get more information than if it's in plain text. Just because there's unique details in the encryption process. But then if it's not encrypted, we're fingerprinting like the HTTP connection in the client and what's happening there. And we're constantly working on like new fingerprinting methods for different protocols. So as another example, even if it's SSH, so instead of not TLS, but even if it's SSH, we could, JA4 Plus can tell you what's happening in that SSH session. Is it a file transfer, or is it a reverse SSH shell, or a normal interactive forward shell? Like it can tell you all of that, even though it's all encrypted.
Yeah, this is getting into one of the like more deeper technical questions that I have, is really like HTTP, HTTPS, like that's probably, I don't know, 80% of the internet or something along those lines. But when you get into those more specialized protocols, like even in SSH, I imagine there's a lot of variation to fingerprint within that. So how do you choose which protocols to tackle fingerprinting in?
It's honestly wherever I see there's a problem, or wherever people tell me that they would like me to figure out. Like with the SSH thing, someone asked me if you could do something with SSH to help us understand what's going on in an SSH session better. That would be awesome. And then so I started working on it. So if anyone has any ideas on things that they would like me to dive into, like problems that they would like to see solved, let me know, because that's kind of like, that's where I go.
Yeah, I feel like Emily or Himija, if you have a question in this realm, I feel like now is a good time.
I actually have like a totally different question. So if there are more things around this, if folks want to talk about that, I want to give the floor.
You're good.
So I guess in thinking about this from the perspective of hunting for malware or malicious infrastructure, right? Like, I think these types of fingerprints are often touted as a really good way to do that and find particular pockets of activity. But I think, at least in my experience, sometimes you've got to already know, kind of like, you have to have a fingerprint to start with. And I'm curious, as somebody who's developed these methods, right? What's your sort of ideal way of leveraging these when you're trying to find other malicious or interesting things, right? Because, like, if you get thousands of results, that's probably not what you want. If you get 2, that's also probably not what you're looking for. So, like, how do you recommend folks best use this technology?
Yeah, good question. This is so how I guess hunt with these fingerprints is, so like if a report comes out on, someone getting compromised, and they're like, here's how it happened and here's the IOCs. Diving into like historical analysis on those IOCs of like what at the time that they were being used for the attack. Like, let's say this IP was being used for this attack at that time. So you can go back and like census and look to see what was running on that host at that time, and also what the fingerprints were. And so then you get a good idea of like, okay, that host had these fingerprints. Now, what else has those fingerprints? And sort of pivoting that way and trying to find unique combinations of not just the fingerprints, but also like, okay, they had these fingerprints, but they also had, these open ports, and things sort of look like that. And if you could combine them all together, then you got a good, effectively a rule for that sort of threat actor or that tool set that they were using. And then if I can dive in even further with like some PCAP, or some things that don't already have fingerprints, then and I see something that's like extremely unusual, or what I think is unusual, then that becomes a good candidate for building a fingerprint for, and then we test it, and if it works, then that becomes a new fingerprint.
So for most folks, this is about finding similar, relevant, related traffic or communication versus, I mean, I guess if someone identified, like, basically there's a reason to find the signature, whether it's your own investigation or maybe a threat report that's shared out that includes a signature. But you kind of always start with a signature versus I'm trying to think of something to compare it to. Basically like a malicious file hash. Like, you're like, oh, this is bad. Like, I need to go look for that. But here you have something to start with, and then you're looking for what's related to it. Is that fair?
Yeah. Another way that I've used these fingerprints in the past for finding bad things, for finding unknown bad things is, obviously you can look for like rare fingerprints, and then you can just search through those and see what's there. But yeah, I've been in situations where there's been like security incidents, where we get like, an alert on something, and then we look at the fingerprints, and then, all right, what else am I seeing those fingerprints on? And just, continuously massaging the query a little bit until I get something that's rare. And then from there being like, okay, I don't know what this fingerprint is. I know it's related to this system that's been compromised. So if I search based on that, now I'm like, okay, now there's 10 systems that are compromised. I can see what they are and then dive into that. Even without knowing what the fingerprint means or what it is, it's just, I know that it's extremely rare and has only been observed on compromised systems. And so we dive in from there.
And it may be helpful to point out, like, the signature format is like a ABC format where, as you mentioned earlier, it's different parts of the traffic are identified or assigned a signature. So you can, and I know like you and I had a conversation about this because I was looking into something where it's like the first and second sections match, but maybe not the end of C. So I was trying to figure out like how relevant that is. So it may be helpful to kind of quickly touch on that ABC format.
Yeah, so all the fingerprints they're human readable, which is great because when people send me fingerprints, I can just glance at it and be like, oh, I think I understand what's going on here, or no, that's Chrome. And then they're delimited and these sort of extensible sections. So like the JA4 fingerprint, for example, the first part is sort of metadata that's human readable. The second part is the cipher suites, and the third part is the extensions. If you have a tool that is just like cycling through cipher suites, basically like a cipher scanner, trying to find out what ciphers are supported on any given server, that cipher part of the fingerprint will be constantly changing. That's the B part, the middle part. But the parts A and C will remain the same. So if you want to find the cipher scanner, you would just put into Splunk or Elastic or whatever your log search engine is, and just do part A, then star, then part C. And that's your like single simple search that would find the cipher scanner every time, no matter if they're cycling through ciphers. So it makes it a lot easier to use than like JA3 and whatnot.
Is there? Oh, go ahead, Himija.
I was gonna ask. So you mentioned how the cipher is dynamic. Something I'm curious about is kind of in general, since you're fingerprinting such a wide array of different clients, right? How much of a task is it to keep up with like changing configurations, or especially for like malicious fingerprints? Do you notice like that they like false positives become a problem over time as their signatures change?
Oh yeah, definitely. So we're working on automated methods to try to stay on top of things better. So there is a database, JA4db.com, and we're working on revamping that database so that it has a way to stay on top of things a lot better. But yeah, so normal tools, let's say like Chrome and Firefox, for example, their fingerprints will change probably once every quarter, like usually with every major like browser update, the fingerprints change. So you wouldn't want to use those as like an allow list. Like I only want to see traffic from Chrome, so allow list this fingerprint. That won't work because Chrome will just update constantly. For malware, the updates are usually a lot slower, and the fingerprints stay, fairly static, usually lasting about a year before like there's some major like update to the tool set or something like that. But yeah, there's always going to be the concern of false positives, especially when you're looking at malware, and that's why it's best to use a combination of fingerprints. Rarely is there ever just a silver bullet fingerprint for something. Sometimes there is, which is awesome when there is, but in most cases you want to use a combination of fingerprints. So like, this JA4 plus this JA4S plus this JA4X. If you see that combination together in one connection, then it's this malware. But any one of those on their own might not be. So a good example would be like, Sliver malware. Sliver is written in Golang. So the JA4 fingerprint is just going to be Golang. So the JA4 will just look like anything that's written in Go, and there's a lot of legitimate applications written in Go. But the way that the C2 server looks and the way that it responds to its client is, more unique than than how legitimate applications usually respond. And so if you combine all the fingerprints together, then you can build a high fidelity detection logic.
One of the things that this really it resonates with me, this idea of like trying to put a language to the way that the internet behaves and grows and evolves. And like fingerprinting is one of the ways that we do that. At Greenways, it was like tagging things. At VulnCheck, it's documenting things. At Census, it's also kind of this tagging things concept. For fingerprinting in particular, do you take like this, trying to ask it without like sounding cheesy, but taking inspiration from anything in linguistics or anything in the past to kind of put words to what you're trying to communicate, like quote unquote words, patterns maybe, or how are you inspired maybe?
I would say that it all comes back to like my analysis background. I'm always thinking about how will this look in the logs for the analyst, and how will the analyst utilize these fingerprints. And I'm always trying to make sure that it works in the best way, that would work in the most logging systems, that would be the easiest to write scripts against or to write queries against. So that's really what I'm always sort of thinking about as, you know, I'm building these like fingerprint algorithms. So that's the
is there been are there trying to think of to ask this like responsibly, but are there any like privacy concerns or implications around the use of these signatures?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a good point. So there, as with any technology, there's a way to use it for bad, for evil, and network fingerprinting is no example, or no. It's the same, right? It's
No exception.
no exception. That's what I meant. Yeah, it's so I mean, like if you want to be able to tell like who's using this particular type of application, it's very possible, like who's using Telegram. If you want to know, like that's like even if it's encrypted, that's still very possible. Someone asked at the beginning, does ECH defeat JA4? So ECH is encrypted client hello, and what that is a it's a like a way that Cloudflare and Google specifically are trying to hide the server name from anyone who's watching network traffic. So, so if you don't know, the destination server name is unencrypted when you're connecting over TLS. The destination server name is in the client hello, and so you know what website people are going to. And so to fix that, they've created this encrypted client hello, which is there's a generic client hello with the generic server name, and it'll be just like something generic.cloudflare or something like that. And then after it connects to that system at Cloudflare or at Google or something, then there's a second client hello that's encrypted that has the true server name, and it passes it off. So that doesn't defeat JA4 in any way, because the fingerprint is of the makeup of the client hello, and so the client hello is still in the clear, and then there's another one that's encrypted. It doesn't matter. You can still fingerprint the application. All that does is just make it so that no one can see, or all it does is it makes it so the only person or only company that can see what website you're going to is Cloudflare or is Google. So only they have the ability to sell your data.
And when you talk about like the ability to see the traffic to fingerprint, that's at the network layer. So it just depends on where you're connecting through. You know, like at home, it's your ISP. At work, it's your corporate network. In a hotel, it could be the hotel or their tech stack, right? So it's not necessarily, and this is more of a clarification or a question, but it's not necessarily the person beside you that you're worried about fingerprinting it. It's the person service that you're using, where the traffic is being routed through.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
can.
I didn't want to make people too overly paranoid.
Yeah,
Inappropriately
but the fingerprinting also works at the destination side. So the server side, they can fingerprint the client that's connecting to them and understand who's connecting to me. Are they connecting to me with a browser or with a bot or with whatever? And so that makes like detecting fraud and stuff like that really easy.
Yeah, I really like this point in the chat about people talking about privacy, but we're actually getting more proprietary. I think about this a lot, is just how the internet is changing so much. The more people are behind Cloudflare and behind all of these other things that, it's not just like your firewall's plugged into the internet and that's it. You have a WAF and that's it. Like it's become so obfuscated in so many ways so that people can sell things. How are you partnering with certain companies, or are you just like kind of staying in the facts of things, because that's all an analyst has, is like that visibility. They don't have the insight of like what Cloudflare does to packets usually. Like, how do you work with this situation?
Yeah, I mean, we're obviously partnering with a lot of companies to help deploy network fingerprinting to help, find and stop bad. Like we're partnered with Census. We're partnered with Gray Noise. So, so we're partnering with a lot of companies to help out with network fingerprinting. I don't know of anyone who's trying to use it in like a sell your data sort of scenario. I haven't experienced that yet.
It's all been
But
good.
it's all been for stopping the bots and stopping the bad guys and that sort of stuff. So that's the area that I've been in. But yeah, it's a great point that this, ECH just makes it so that only Cloudflare and Google know where you're going, and they do sell that data. And then yeah, DNS over HTTPS again. Who's running the DNS over HTTPS service, and are they just collecting your data? They're just making it so that only they have your data. So, I don't know. I'm a little bit jaded. I just think that there's no such thing as privacy anymore.
Dang. Real. Unfortunately, real. If something is free, you are the product. Kind of reigns true for me.
Yeah, it's the same with like VPN services. It's like the only VPN service you can trust is the VPN host that you set up yourself.
Even then, can I really trust it? Because I don't know that I'm like versed in VPNs enough to make sure that it's like secure enough.
Yep. Yeah.
You sell your own data.
That's true. Yeah. Right. That's where we need to get to. We need to get to the point where we can sell our own data. Like, no, it's my data. I want to sell
Everyone's their own LLC.
I spent the weekend with a bunch of Web3 people, and I got to say, they really convinced me on the whole be your own bank thing. So be your own bank, sell your own data, make
Maybe
your
we
own
should
sugar, be
have
your
a
own
follow-up conversation on that topic.
I have another random question about JA4. So I guess the whole fingerprinting thing, but have you noticed any kind of overt cases of networks or environments where it didn't work really well, or like edge cases?
Where network fingerprinting just didn't work very well.
Yeah, like too noisy or.
No, it's all valuable. It's all anywhere where it's deployed. It still produces like valuable information that is valuable in like security response, incident response, or analysis. I haven't been in any scenario where it just doesn't provide anything at all. Can't think of anything. Yeah, I know. It sounds
win
like
is a
I'm like
win.
just tooting my own horn here, but I can't literally can't I legitimately can't think of a scenario where it just doesn't make sense to have it. The the there are definitely like some like bad ways to deploy it, like I mentioned. Um, Doing an allow list just based on browser fingerprints won't work because as soon as the browser updates, then you've just broken your service. Um, but allow lists in production environments where changes are very strict and they have to go through a change process, that is possible because like if you have an email farm where you just got a whole bunch of email servers and that's all that exists in this one production environment. Well, they all are probably running the exact same software and only produce the same fingerprints. And so in that environment, you could just be like, only allow this fingerprint outbound. And then as you update your email servers, you would just run through a change check that would be like, does the fingerprint change? If so, then update our fingerprint as we deploy our change. So that's stuff like that is very doable in production, very, very effective. Because if that environment gets compromised, the bad guys want to connect outbound to their C2 server and it's not going to work. So
I'm going to ask Bob's question that's in the chat here since he is spying after the coup. Are there any proxy server vendors using or planning to use JA4 Plus to give enterprises tools for blocking certain sessions without having to do the daft thing of breaking TLS and inspecting the plain text?
So there are iRules for JA4 Plus for F5 load balancers. We're working on JA4 Plus for Nginx. EvilGenX is also working on adding JA4 Plus. So, like I said, it can be used for bad as well. But the answer is yes. It's happening.
It's happening. I
We
will.
also have a JA4 Plus eBPF firewall that we're working on. So if anyone's interested in that, contact me.
Interesting. Well, gang, I think I was going to move on to the water discussion. The water discussion, if nobody has any more questions. Cool. I've got, my brain is definitely rolling about fingerprinting, so maybe we'll bring it back. But I did find out something very interesting in the pre-show, John, is that both of our dads are into water. And previously
In
worked
general, or
in water. No,
Yeah,
they
so
worked in water departments or with water systems.
water systems, yeah.
Yeah. So this is kind of interesting. The OIG, the Office of the Inspector General released a report for, this is like with the EPA, so environmental protection. They were taking a look at, gosh, what was the number? It was
So there's over 300 drinking water systems, and they looked at that appear to have weaknesses, and I think just over 1,000 water systems that they assessed during this process.
And they broke it down into, what were the critical vulnerabilities and everything along those lines. And turns out a lot of them have critical vulnerabilities. But when I was reading the report, it doesn't really say what those critical, high, medium, low vulnerabilities are, but it broke it down into not only the like technical vulnerabilities, but like the human vulnerabilities as well. So things like if somebody was phished, if there was physical security. So when I was talking to my dad about this last night, who used to do construction in water systems and building pump stations and all of that, he was like, well, what I think is that somebody really would have to blow something up to to cause some real damage. And that was where his brain was at. But but John, you
Yeah.
had a different take on this.
You know, I asked my dad the same thing. So he runs a water system, and you know, a lot of the times in the news when they talk about like water systems getting compromised, they talk about the water system getting poisoned, you know, as they're doing their, you know, as they clean the water for drinking water, and that's just not really much of a concern. My dad was like, there's just too many like checks in place, like it would get found out pretty quick, and then they would fix it. My dad's concern was more about the water pumps themselves. So like if you were to run, if the system were to get compromised and they were to run the pumps at 100%, they would cause the pipes to burst, the pumps would burn out, and then that's it. Then there's no water. And my dad was telling me about how he recently had a pump that died, and there's just no replacement pumps in the country. So the only thing you can do is you can order a new pump from France, and it'll take 6 months, or you try to get it refurbished, which also takes a couple months. And so there's just no, if the pumps burn out, then that's kind of it. There's no water, and there's no way to quickly recover either.
Yeah.
That's my concern.
Yeah.
And also, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're fine.
Yeah, and also what I don't see a lot of people talking about, and this concern of water systems getting compromised, is that if like in Loudoun County, for example, where you know AWS East and most of the internet flows through, those data centers are cooled by the county water system. And so if Loudoun County water were to go down, that the internet goes down. And that's not an exaggeration. Like that's it would be a real big cascading effect, and it would cause the, you know, I think the majority of the internet to go down, because there's, like, these data centers have backup power, they have generators, but as far as I'm aware, they don't have a backup water source that isn't the county water. So
Yeah.
Am I wrong to imagine? Like, I just imagined that the coolant water is recycled. Like it's not being, like it's a
Well, I don't think
contained and reused.
not really. It evaporates.
Yeah, fair. Okay.
and it can't
They
be reclaimed water, because that would damage the cooling systems, because reclaimed water doesn't have the purity.
Yeah.
From what I understand. I could be wrong about that.
So it is reclaimed water. I looked it up yesterday after
really?
seeing what we were going to talk about. It's Loudoun County reclaimed water, that they like filter enough for it to be used in data center purposes. That way the data centers aren't using potable water, which is too expensive. But they can use potable water. That's their backup. If the reclaimed water goes down, then they use the potable water. But if all the pumps are dead, then they got nothing.
Yeah.
The idea that if the data center isn't getting the water right, then we're taking away from the drinking water of the citizens is, yeah. So 2 out of 2 dads of cybersecurity experts agree that the worst risk here is the water disappears, and water is a very valuable resource.
It's scary stuff.
I can't say I've thought about the supply chain impact of this scenario. Of, like, we think of water, like, yeah, it's everywhere. I mean, it's less everywhere than it used to be, but that's a different topic. You know, so it just seems like it's like the oldest utility. It's findable. Like if you drill deep enough, you'll find water, whatever. But to think about the supplies of what makes that water usable, reusable, in the right place at the right time, that's something. And so you were using the pump example. Like that's something I haven't really thought about. Is I don't know. Like, so in this report, they talk about how, at least in their findings, the affected water systems are predominantly serving populations under 10,000, which is going to imply that they have less resources, less controls, less everything, right? And so thinking about what you mentioned, and having several of those populations of 10,000 suddenly being without water, that's, and then for an extended amount of time as they have to replace pumps or whatever, like that's a scenario I haven't actually thought about in that way. That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's in my opinion, it's the scariest like public utility outage thing.
I agree.
Like if
But it takes electricity to get that water pumped. So electricity
no,
or water.
because because there's generators that can run forever, and you just pump it, bring in some more diesel. Like we can live without electricity for for months, but we can only survive without water
Speak
for
for
24
yourself.
hours.
I got a good 2 hours before I'm.
Well, I hope you have a generator, Glenn. When the other part of this dad talk that I had in terms of the water systems was he was in the 9/11 era when he was working, and like the post 9/11 discussions around like terrorism on the water systems and stuff, which really proves that like none of everything old is new again, right? But he had a really funny story about how we're in Arizona, so they have some like fairly, I don't know, unique or whatever systems. And he was talking about how there were some guys and they were photographing one of the reservoirs or one of the pumping stations out in the hills, and the security systems caught them, and they asked the guys who they were, and they said, well, we're from Saudi Arabia and we were really interested in your water systems and taking what you do and doing it out there. So it was a big to do about all of that. But sometimes there's just like people staring at things, people poking at things. And I think now that they're internet connected, we have a lot of like Shodan poking at things, and seeing, just how do these things work, and maybe
I mean,
being
not
really
to replug the thing we plugged 1,000 times, but Gray Noise and Census's research over the summer into water systems, HMIs, human machine interfaces that were connected, which is mentioned a little bit in this report too. I still have nightmares with what we saw, like the way they look alone is criminal. So that doesn't even include how they function or what their exposure level is.
Or like, the lack of authentication.
Yeah.
and the like difficulty of contacting some of these places.
Oh my God. We could do a literal entire show about the struggle of trying to identify who owns these devices and then reaching out to them and having them take you seriously if you don't have a government agency in your back pocket to help you. It's wild.
Yep. It's because all of these utilities are just run by, whoever will do the work. There's no like government agency. They're just like my dad.
Well,
runs
so
the
what's
water
interesting
system.
is like electric systems, they have like NERC and other like there's other like regulations around it.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it feels a little bit like water doesn't. I'm sure there is legislation around it. I'm sure that I'm just not aware of it, but like it feels fundamentally different in some way that I can't fully put my finger on.
Well, so for example, my dad wanted to put some security around the pumping station. So he just went to Best Buy and bought some security cameras and just put them in. And I'm like, are they IP cameras? What kind of cameras did you buy, Dad?
Quick vision.
No,
just put them on the internet.
Gonna be sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Like I love the dads, and just my dad was saying like, oh, they're just like Ring cameras, and I was like, and he's like, well, they're not actually Ring, but they're like that. Like, oh
But it completely makes sense because, right, like they're just trying to do a job. They're just trying to like figure out like how to monitor things or how to, keep an eye on
got
stuff
these off Temu.
that they like really perceive as like the real threats to these systems, which I'm not saying they're not. I mean, we've all heard about the reports over the last few years of people showing up at like electrical substations with guns to shoot the substations. So like those things happen and it's understandable. But yeah, I think there is like this big security like knowledge or skills gap, and that's not like in a way to like disparage anybody. It's just like that's not been their job. Like we can't expect people to like necessarily know that without having dealt with some of this stuff.
It's what happens when you put these old technologies, these old things that were never meant to be on the internet or never manufactured to be on the internet. So like the old school folks are still thinking of the kinetic threats, whereas now they're on the internet, so they've entered our realm.
What I don't want to happen is I don't want these places to fall victim. Well, I say maybe victim is dramatic, but like just having a bunch of IT contractors like take care of their cybersecurity, because like having it not in-house obfuscates everything from the people who like know about the systems. So you don't have that continuous like one-on-one like back and forth building a relationship between the people who understand the systems and the people who understand cybersecurity. Like if the government ends up contracting these things out, it's like they set it up once and then monitor it from a distance. So I hope that the water industry like gets well funded. I'm daydreaming, but
All utilities
all the
should have.
utilities get dedicated water cybersecurity experts.
I'd love to see CISA have more of a role in these sort of things, and even if it's just prescribing, like you got to run, if you're gonna have cameras, you should run like these cameras or something like that, because the people who are running these water systems, when they're thinking about security, they don't know. There's no one to tell them what to get. They could literally go to Best Buy and whatever the sales rep says to get is what they're getting.
Also,
And it would be
CISA
great if there was.
They publish all that guidance, right? Like they have these sort of like OT security guidelines. I know when like the stuff in Aliquippa happened a year ago, and then like there was some stuff earlier this year. They published things, but I don't think there's necessarily enforcement because they're not under CISA's purview. They're not like a federal civilian executive branch agency. So like the recommendations are there, but I don't necessarily think there's enforcement power from CISA, or the EPA has it, I think, but I don't know how that's going to play out.
They also have a free vulnerability scanning service. You can literally just email CISA if you're a water utility, be like, hey, can you scan me? And they'll send you emails with all your vulnerabilities. So I think it might be, again, that going back to like that general awareness and baseline understanding of the stakes.
Yeah, that's good.
Because
I didn't know
right
about
now
that.
what I'm thinking is that people are thinking, oh, let's say I turn off my system to patch it and then it doesn't go off back online. That is a bigger risk to my job than the alternative.
Well, I fully think that we could talk about this for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah, who knew, actually? We thought this was going to be like a 5-minute topic, and then in pre-show, we're like, actually,
we have many thoughts about this, but I am going to
why don't you bring your dads on? We should have a...
I know. I would love to have the dads just talk about water.
That'd be pretty good.
I will mention that at VulnCheck, we wrote a blog. More accurately, Jacob Baines wrote a blog about how we are outpacing the NIST NVD with our NVD++ resource. So we are providing CP data. That's the machine readable data that links the, like if you have a vulnerability scanner, machine data. So it's making sure that products are something that your computer can recognize. Whatever, that's a terrible explanation. Moving on. We do it at a much faster rate, 4 days faster, actually. And there is a blog if you want to read more about that. Emily, did you want to tease the census blog quickly?
Yeah, so we actually have, along the lines of talking about water and critical infrastructure security, we have a report coming out this Thursday around internet exposed industrial control systems. We take a global look at sort of all the things we can see, including HMIs globally, and wrote it up into a nice report. And we'll be sharing that on Thursday. So keep an eye out for that if that's something of interest. I'm sure we'll talk more about it in the coming weeks.
I'm going to do a surprise closer question for us all. John, how many glasses of water do you drink a day? How hydrated are you?
So I try to get big glasses because I hate going to get like more water from the fridge. It's just like I want to keep working on whatever I'm working on. So I try to get giant glasses, and I guess 6 a day. I don't
Wow.
know.
Yeah, we have to define what a glass is.
Yeah,
That
right.
he held it up. He held the glass
Like,
up.
is this a glass?
It's this big. I don't know.
Hemaja, how about you? How hydrated are you? How many glasses a day?
I try to do like 40 to 50 ounces. I don't know how many glasses that is, but that's how big my water bottle is.
Perfect. Glenn?
I drink a lot of water. So this is like 32. So I probably have 2 to 3 of these a day. So yeah, 60. Yeah, no, I drink a lot of water. It's a problem.
Emily, are you more hydrated than Glenn?
Are you gonna roast me?
No.
She's definitely more hydrated.
I try for 120 ounces a day.
How many liters
Wow.
is that?
Is that a gallon? What's in a gallon?
I don't remember, but it's 2 40-ounce, well, 3 40-ounce cups.
I aim for a gallon. We're extremely hydrated crew.
Now I need to know. I gotta look up how many ounces are in a gallon.
Water's important,
Water is
especially
Water
if
is
you
important.
drink, especially if you
128.
drink coffee.
Yeah.
It doesn't. Coffee
128
doesn't count
ounces.
as water. I will die on this hill. It dehydrates
No.
you.
It's a
It
diuretic.
dehydrates you. If you
Yeah.
have coffee, you have to have like base. It's like alcohol. If you have a glass of coffee, you need a glass of water.
Has anyone ever said that coffee is the same thing as water?
Oh, all the time. People are like,
Old
oh, I'm
people.
drinking water. It's just in my coffee. And it's like, well, that's
Oh
not.
no.
Or tea.
Yeah.
They say
Yeah.
the same about tea.
I
If it has
definitely
caffeine,
know
it's
people
yeah.
In the
who
chat, we have.
just drink Starbucks and that's it.
Oh, now the chat's alive.
Oh, I
Okay.
feel like I would die.
All right. And that's our show. From fingerprints to water prints, we've tapped it all today. Remember to stay secure out there because unlike our drinking water systems, you don't want your network to be an open tap. Thanks for being on, John. We really appreciate it. Bye.